Thank you, Moses. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I lead research, user research and insights, and I always get a few eyebrows, especially from my mother, who it's a very vague title, so she has trouble explaining to her friends who ask them, what does your daughter do? And I simply say that I research people, which is true, and in this case, I research them in the context of their motivations, their values, their behaviors, in order to affect a more positive product design. So in the context of immersive computing, what I do is try to understand teacher challenges, their workflows. We observe in classrooms, and we try to understand how our HP products can serve educators better. So as Moses mentioned, I'd like to share with you a few insights that we've gained from putting Sprouts in classrooms throughout the world. So this is a picture of a training that we recently hosted just outside of Los Angeles at a public high school, a large public high school called Rancho Verde. And it was a training for their newly christened Sprout lab. It's a dedicated lab for 5 Sprout computers that the teachers and the students will be using over the course of the year. And we had initially invited teachers. We didn't know that they were going to bring students, but it turned out to be one of the best trainings simply because of this fact. So the students that were there they were obviously engaged in the technology. This is Bennett on the left and his friend Ricky. And in the space between breakfast and the beginning of the training, they had already sussed the whole computer out. They knew exactly what they were doing. So they had discovered that you could do Chinese calligraphy on the mat. They discovered interacting with a 3D software via touch. And throughout the whole session, they were really active participants of how we could engage Sprout in their learning and in the teachers' lessons plans. So having them there showed us that and I'm sure you're all witness to this too on a daily basis, that technology is the voice of adolescence. There's no ramp-up time for them. They just automatically get it. And when we can give them these tools that they're used to communicating with, it's the way they ingest information. They understand how to get data from phones, from computers. They're used to seeing it off screens. And when we can provide them tools that allow them to use this voice and at the same time speak to our educational goals for them, then it's really empowering and engaging. And sometimes it helps them discover things that they didn't even know they could do. This is Rachel. She was actually part of the training as the film crew to record the training, and she started working on Sprout during one of the session breaks. And she was doing this pretty incredible drawing, and at the end of the session, I asked everyone to share their experiences about their use of Sprout, and she said, I asked her, do you like drawing on Sprout better than you like drawing on sketchbooks or on paper? And she said, actually, I don't really ever draw on sketchbooks or paper. And I don't know, I just like using Sprout. But she had trouble qualifying exactly why. And I see this with individuals and with other groups of students as well. There's something very magnetic about Sprout, and it draws people in, this immersive experience of being able to work maybe in a more ergonomic way. And it helps them sort of stay focused. And for her, she kind of started to understand that with these tools, she could be a bit more creatively expressive. So just out of curiosity, who has been out to the booth and seen Sprout? Some of us. Does anyone have a Sprout? Yeah? Okay, one. So for those of you who haven't seen it or don't know what it does yet, this is the Sprout computer. It's the Sprout Immersive computer. We call it immersive because there's this space in between the horizontal display and the touch mat where something that we like to call blended reality can take place. There are cameras in the housing over the screen, and it's a web camera facing you and a downward-facing camera, and also a projector. And the projector means that the touch mat becomes a second display. At its core, though, it's a powerful Windows computer, which means that anything you can do on a Windows PC, you can do on this machine as well. And it has, because of the depth sensing camera in the illuminator, it can scan in 3D objects. So Sprout has native apps that were designed to work in this immersive environment. But like I said before, it is a Windows computer, and as such, any program that you can run on Windows, Microsoft Office, Adobe Creative Suite, all of those can be run on Sprout, and they can be run on this more engaging touchmat surface. And as such, as a Windows computer, you can run a browser, so Chrome-based apps that can run in the browser, not necessarily on Chrome OS, but in the browser, they can be used on Sprout as well. There's a whole Windows App Store that has apps that you can run on the browser. Some work extremely well there, too. So we see that Sprout's best suited for 3 main areas. One, computer or media labs, replacing one machine or replacing all of the machines. It's also an asset to have in classrooms as a student and as a teacher station. Sometimes people think that desktops are becoming irrelevant in classrooms, but I see that in classrooms where the device ratio is many to one, that students have this knowledge of what they need, like what tool they need for the right task, and they'll choose what they need. And often students tell me that they like using their desktops over using their laptops, which initially was very surprising. The final place is emerging free spaces like libraries that are sort of reinventing themselves, innovation labs, and maker spaces. Obviously, Sprout is a very good way to engage in the 3D capture and design process. So in our research, we've seen that Sprout is a great tool to augment active learning environments, specifically project-based ones. And often project-based learning happens over the space of 2 weeks or longer, but problem-based learning and team-based learning and these other kind of real-world methods can happen in a shorter time frame too. And Sprout's a great tool to help augment the PBL process. So in the research stage, when people are collecting and organizing information, they can do it very visually on Sprout. In the inquiry and innovation stage, it's an excellent team-based brainstorming and creation station. It promotes 21st century schools by fostering communication, collaboration, and creativity. It's a great device around which a lot of students can work. In the feedback and revision stage, it's easy to document and revise ideas. And finally, in the public presentation, you can use Sprout to create these very interactive and professional communications. We have a number of educators who are using Sprout specifically in project-based learning, and this is a teacher who is a combo class teacher. So this is a class of 4th, 5th, and 6th graders who have some learning disabilities and special needs, and they are an exclusively project-based school. So they only use, there are no textbooks in this school, and the kids are some of the most articulate and engaged students that I've ever come across. And they're using Sprout stop motion and in other ways to augment their project-based learning environment. So specifically, we say that Sprout augments the classroom and teaching experience through 3 main categories. One is facilitating high-quality STEAM experiences. One is creating rich content and documentation. And finally, presenting and showcasing in new ways. So towards high-quality STEAM experiences, obviously, because of its 3D capture and seamless 3D capture and design process, it can augment that part of the STEAM experience. For coding and robotics, it's a really interesting tool. We researched with some students in a Lego robotics coding class over the summer, and what they told us was that having more information, so sort of reference information on the vertical display, and having their coding on the horizontal touchmat was a really good environment for them because they felt like they didn't have to ask the teacher questions all the time. They could kind of go and look for the information themselves and have it at their fingertips. For data-rich research, where, like I was saying before, students are very good at ingesting information via electronic methods, and they also know that this is kind of the way that they work. They get lots of different tabs going, and having all those visual at once helps them to make decisions better. So some of the apps that are specific for 3D work are 3D capture, which scans in objects and creates full 360 models. And SizeUp, which is one of my favorite apps. It doesn't do something amazing, but I think it really highlights this idea of blended reality in the sense that when you put something down on the mat, the computer's looking at it, the camera's looking at it, and on the screen it shows you the size, the dimensions of all the different lines. And the thing that highlights the blended reality is turning it into manual mode and putting an object down on the mat, and then you're able to use your finger to draw a ruler between 2 points. And so that actually gives you the sense that you are manipulating this digital space. So I'd encourage you to go try it out afterwards if you want to have a look. Towards creating rich content and documenting work, Sprout, I think the concentration is in this area where, because it's such a visual device, you're able to create visual communications very, very easily. It's also good for e-portfolios, which Emily was touching on, where the students are taking their work and documenting the process of it. With Flipped Classroom, because of the cameras that are already set up the way that they are, one in the housing, the illuminator, and one, the webcam, looking at you, it makes it an easy way to make Flipped Classroom videos, so record lectures for both students and teachers, students who are talking about their work or teachers who are explaining a lesson. So with video capture, the app allows you to select which feeds you'd like to show picture in picture. So for example, in this one, the student has the webcam facing her, and then she has the touch mat camera, so the one pointing downwards, where she's showing what she's cut out. Capture is an app that takes the physical object and pulls it into the digital space quickly. Create is a way to create layouts. So with the objects that you've captured, you can lay them out. So finally, presenting and showcasing in new ways. Sprout is a great teacher station in the sense that you can create blended content presentations that are more interactive. Sprout it can kind of replace 3 separate objects in the classroom: a smartboard, a visualizer, and the computer itself, right? So when you're making blended content presentations, you can imagine that you have a science teacher who's showing a chemistry lesson, and with the background, it's the display of the computer. So maybe you have a temperature sensor, and you have a graph of the temperature rising between 2 solutions that are poured together. And maybe at one peak, the 2 solutions change color, and with the downward-facing camera and the feed of the display going at the same time, you can show a more interactive, an interactive presentation. Also, Sprout is great for telling a lot of stories, and I'm just going to skip on to this app called Stop Motion, which is it's a very popular app with both students and teachers, and it allows you to create stop motion animation videos in a very, very fast way. And I think this really helps students get out their creative expression and show their knowledge at the same time. This is another teacher who is from the Catherine Smith School in San Jose, the all project-based learning school, and she has her 6th graders using stop motion animation to show the effects of smoking on human lungs. So this school in it's in Pennsylvania, is using Sprout in all 3 of the ways that I was just mentioning. So as part of a high-quality STEAM experience, they're understanding the complexities of objects, and they're taking things apart and showing how they work together. They're using the documentation aspects of Sprout to document their process, and then using the presentation aspects of Sprout to do both virtual and in-person presentations. So I would encourage you to, if you haven't yet, go to hp.com/go/Sprout for Learning, because we have sprouts that are all over the world, and this is on the website you can find videos of people doing some really interesting things with Sprout in their classrooms. So I think maybe the most important insight that I've had as a researcher working on this project is that Sprout is a device that builds bridges. First and foremost, bridges for engagement. And it's the most organic kind of engagement that you can have. It's the kind of engagement where you don't have to force anybody to do anything, that they really want to do it themselves. It builds bridges between learning styles. Someone told me once that there are up to 26 different styles of learning in any given classroom. I think that's a really arbitrary number that's probably dependent on the number of kids in the classroom, because probably every single kid has a different style of learning. And Sprout gives you the creative tools to let all of those kids have their voice and let all those kids learn in the way that they know how best. These two young ladies were at the Rancho Verde training, and I asked them in the activity where I was asking the teachers to contextualize Sprout and try to figure out how they might use it in their own lessons. I asked the students who were at the training to recreate a homework assignment that they'd recently done, but instead use Sprout. And these two ladies had recently done a homework assignment on how the Polynesians explored and colonized the Pacific Ocean for their AP World History class. And these ladies then, with Sprout, took Create. They used it to project down onto construction paper, cut out the consonants, then use that as a map, and they created small Play-Doh figurines and a boat to act as the Polynesians, and then they created a stop-motion animation about how they went from island to island. And when they were presenting this back to us, the woman on the right said that she actually learned something different doing it this way than she had before. This is a really interesting one, I think, because Sprout creates a bridge between disciplines. And this woman on the left was a teacher of physics, and the one on the right was a photography teacher. And in this same activity where I asked the teachers to contextualize Sprout in their own lessons, they worked together to come up with a lesson that combined those two subjects. It was around Halloween time, and this lesson was around taking a time-lapse photograph of a pumpkin being catapulted, and then scanning that into Sprout and recreating a stop motion that showed the physics of the arc that the pumpkin took as it left the catapult. And finally, I think this is the most important one. Sprout is a bridge for ability gaps. We've placed Sprout in some special needs environments. This one was in a center just outside of Chicago called the Pioneer Center for Human Services. It's an adult day program for people who have Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, to learn independent life skills. And they initially purchased Sprouts to address maybe their clients' need for more creative expression. So they thought, well, our clients are going to use the Create app because it's easy to draw on, or maybe they'll use the Puzzle app because it's something for them to do. But what they found after a year of use is that they no longer use those entertainment apps. What they do is they use Sprout as a way to have their clients access things like Microsoft Word and PowerPoint that presented a cognitive challenge when they had to interface with it via a keyboard and a mouse. But when you take the keyboard and the mouse away, they told me that their clients they look at the mat and they think, coloring book, I can do that. And when they see it on a computer screen, they think, computer, that's a bit too challenging for me, I'm not sure that I can do that. And so for the first time in some of their clients' lives, they're able to access these programs that will enable them to work independently in the future, because they learn it without the keyboard and the mouse, and they become confident with that interface. Then when they see that interface on a regular computer, then all they have to do now, there's only one barrier to overcome, which is the challenge of learning how to use the tool. And I told this to one of the educators at another training who teaches middle school students, And he said, that's interesting. It reminds me of my 7th and 8th graders who are just approaching 3D software for the first time. For them, having to learn the tools and having to understand the space is really difficult, but maybe if I put it on the mat and I take away those tools and they're able to access it with their hands, then they'll have a more positive experience with it. And then when they go back to doing it on their Chromebook or on their laptop, they'll already be familiar with the interface, and then they'll just have to learn how to use the keyboard to address it, and that's something that's easy for them to do. So I just want to leave you with this final video, which is of the Bonsall High School, and they're using it in their project-based learning classes.
Bonsall High School is a EduTECH high school. It's really designed to help students integrate the theoretical knowledge of the classroom with hands-on practical.
The usage of the Sprouts and the purchase of the Sprouts was really due in part to finding a technology that would work with the philosophy of our school, which is the project-based learning, which is the hands-on, real-world, authentic projects. And Sprout, we believe, and we do even stronger now, lends itself very well to our philosophy.
Sprout is inherently fun, right? And so students who use it, they automatically want to start creating things.
It's allowed us to see our objects in new ways. It allowed us to conceptualize it and brainstorm new ideas for our project.
I feel like in the case of a project that we have going on right now in our World Studies class, we have a teacher who's super courageous and just willing to say, let's figure this out together, which I think you have to do when a technology is new.
The final project, which is a working Rube Goldberg machine, is integrated with representation of events of World War II based upon the student's country of choice.
The Sprout helped us create a timeline, and we could represent that timeline in our machine so we knew how each step should happen.
The main way we use the Sprout is through the scanner, which allows 2D and 3-dimensional scans of objects.
The stenciling is fun because you can't really do that on another computer.
Students have designed their machines, they have done revision of the machines on the Sprout, and they've even done some text work with it, so it's completely integrated at all steps.
One thing that's really important to our school is this idea of creating a culture of revision. And so students creating a draft, but realizing the draft is never finished, you just meet a deadline.
The kids themselves asked if they could work on the Sprout at lunch, before school, some after school, because of the interest in the Sprout and then the excitement of building this crazy machine contraption. There was a lot of pride and excitement about the project itself. Yeah! Sprout is right on that cutting edge of creation and what is new. And we don't even know all of the capabilities that we can get from the Sprout to integrate it into our class, into our projects, and into our learning. So as we grow, I will continue to really push to the teachers, be risk takers, use the technology, get the kids in front of it, and get out of the way.
That's all I have. Thank you.